So I am more than excited to be with you this afternoon, and a little nervous. But I want you to think for a minute. If you were to give a 1 or 2 word answer to define hardwired for humanity, what would that be? Just whisper it to the person next to you, or behind you, or in front of you. What do you think of hardwired for humanity? So my clock is my clock isn't running. So, I've been thinking about it for the last couple of weeks. And I'm going to give you a very outside-of-the-box definition for this. But before I do that, yesterday morning when I left Indianapolis, and I was thinking about the presentation this morning and the presentation this afternoon, and I was thinking about what is hardwired for humanity, 2 stories came to my mind. And I brought this journal that was found in our garage a couple weeks ago. My husband found it, and it's our oldest son's. And when I think about hardwired for humanity, I think it's our basic neurobiological need. And I come to you this afternoon as an educator and as a mom and as a community member working with children and adolescents. And so when I opened this journal, I thought at age 10, in 4th or 5th grade, Andrew innately was searching for that social connection that he knew existed. So I have to read this to you, a couple of these beginnings. 10 years old, he writes at the beginning, "Dear Journal, sorry I haven't talked to you lately. Dear Journal, sorry I haven't gotten back to you." Then we move forward 3 years. "Dear Journal," he's now 13. "Dear Journal, what's up? Dear Journal, what's cracking?" And then I read an entry, and it says, "I haven't talked to you for a while. I hate my effing mother so much. I have no clue. I'm too pissed to write later." And then I see a journal entry at age 23, and he's back to, "Dear Journal, I've missed you. Dear Journal, I need to talk." And I thought to myself, these little entries are so telling developmentally of that dire neurobiological basic need to attach and to connect. And technology can be a part of that, but as we know today, technology can also be an adverse childhood experience. And I want to talk to you about that today because as an educator, working with schools and districts, high school, middle school, children at a preschool age, and I'm in the classroom 2 mornings a week, I am seeing so many of our students come in with very little attachment. They are mistrusting adults, and they actually are coming in so rough and so dysregulated that we cannot teach them academically in the brain state they come to. So when I think about this beautiful brain, it is a social organ. Our brains are wired for attachment. In fact, our nervous systems do not develop properly unless we have secure attachments. Attachment is the context for all of our development. And about 30 years ago, something shone a light on something that would have changed me as a mom, and it would have changed the way I parented and taught. And that's the Adverse Childhood Experience Study. And since that time, and it's been shared thousands of times, hundreds of presentations, another new study has been shared in 2017 stating that any of us who grow up with a significant amount of adversities from living in an environment where there was a separation or divorce, from experiencing social rejection or humiliation, from growing up in poverty, from growing up with someone that we loved who was incarcerated, or on and on. In the new study, the vulnerability of that population is an adversity. And we look at social media, the use of technology without buffers. What is that? How is that affecting the brains of our children and adolescents? So we understand even more than what the ACE study shared with us even a few years ago, in that development begins with the brain state of our own mothers. What was the brain state of your mother when she was carrying you? This research comes from Bruce Perry. It comes from Alan Shore. It is heavily steeped in the research of Larry Brintrow and Nick Long. We know that our neurobiology is not only wired for attachment and connection, but it is also wired to be social. And we can't thrive and sometimes even live without connections from others. So as we look at this development of brain architecture, we know today in our country that 27 to 33% of our students are walking in with our nation's new learning disability, and that is anxiety. And we are feeling it as educators, and we are seeing these kids, what we call, coming in rough and dysregulated. And they have a brain, I love this photo, they have a brain that is locked in a survival brain, just a set of brain states that is either preparing to fight, preparing to run, or shut down, has collapsed, or is disassociating. And so this is a brilliant brain. This is a brain that is hardwired for humanity, but the experiences that brain has been exposed to over a period of years has literally changed that brain structurally and functionally. So what looks disrespectful, what looks oppositional, what looks defiant, what looks shut down or apathetic and unmotivated, that behavior is what we call pain-based behavior. That is behavior that is a product of just multiple experiences where that brain has had to regulate on its own. It's had to literally take care of all the stimuli coming in. And so in 18 minutes or less now, I want to share these 3 conditions that as educators, we have this incredible ability, because our children come into schools 13,000 hours approximately, kindergarten through 12th grade. And school is the de facto where we can really make a shift. And the resiliency research is clear that one emotionally available, consistent, healthy connection or attachment with a caregiver can trump the adversities our children and adolescents walk in with. So we know from Dr. Carrian's research that a child who carries in 4 or more adverse childhood experiences is 32.5 times more likely to have academic and behavioral challenges. And for me as an educator, I need to know that. I want to list these 3 conditions because these are so significant for us as parents and for us as educators, or any of us who work beside our children and adolescents. And then I want to share the antithesis of these conditions for what we can do in our classrooms. What we know is that the brain cannot take chronic unpredictability. When we don't know what's coming, it damages brain architecture. We can't access the prefrontal cortex. This is where we do life and do school. This is the seat of our executive functions. That brain develops from the brain stem to the front over a 30-year period. And chronic unpredictability creates survival circuits that become very hardwired for isolation. They become very hardwired for a survival brain state. And so what can we do in the classrooms? We can pay attention to our routines. We can give our students and our own children more predictability. We can set the table for routines and structure, and we can help them to relax knowing that this is going to happen next. I can create an environment in my classroom where things look predictable. They not only are predictable, but they look the way I greet a student, the way that they're seated. The second thing that the brain cannot take is isolation. And this is why I'm here today. This talk, Hardwired for Humanity, is about a new lens for discipline. We have discipline traditionally and historically, and yet we still continually see the same behavioral issues. And yet this research cannot be denied. We have students coming in with a different nervous system, a different stress response system, and a different brain that is programmed and wired to fight, flee, or collapse. And we just cannot keep doing the same things over and over again, expecting that different behavioral sustainable change. Isolating a child who comes in with a lot of adversity is actually unintentionally reactivating a stress response system, and it's sometimes re-traumatizing them because these children and adolescents cannot understand rewards or consequences. That comes from this part of the brain. That part of the brain is shut down and turned off. And it takes time. Like Bruce Perry says, change happens with patterned, repetitive activity. The third thing the brain cannot take is restraint. Think of a time when you've been trapped in an elevator or in a bathroom or just locked. You just can't get out. Or maybe a child grew up with physical abuse or sexual abuse. Maybe your brain wasn't able to fight off the stress. Maybe your brain wasn't able to run away. And our brains have this beautiful natural ability to shut down, to disassociate, and to fend when we can't fight or run from the stress. So meeting our students in brain development is why I'm here today, and that is being hardwired for humanity. Because our children and adolescents, and any of us who experience significant anxiety for short periods of time or long periods of time, require two conditions that continually strengthen our ability to connect and that strengthen our ability to get calm. That is about connection, and that's about regulation. So in this next slide, I want you to think about not only do we see children and adolescents coming in and carrying in adversity, but our teachers and our staff are feeling the emotional contagion of the anxiety that we are seeing in our schools today. And this is another part of this work because emotions are so contagious. So when we think about a new lens for discipline, it's really about my brain state. It's about the teacher, the educator brain state, because a dysregulated adult cannot regulate a child. And I want you to understand that. Traditional discipline works the best with the kids who need it the least. When I'm rough and I am picking up on emotions and triggers from my students, I am not in any state to discipline. Co-regulation is a touch point. Co-regulating with another is our brain's beautiful ability to have a healthy serve and return and to connect what we call using touch points. And touch points are moments of connecting with the way you greet a child, with your facial expression, with your body, with your tone of voice. It's noticing a child, what's going right and well. It's validating, and it's happening in small moments continuously through the day. And we know that many of our students come in, and they're coming in from that brain state where they don't hear words. And we always say, how many of us in the moments of being told to calm down have ever calmed down? The language of the cortex is words, and many of our kids are coming in the brainstem and limbic area. Neurobiologically, we are wired to sense and feel our words and our worlds first. Second, we are feeling creatures who think. We don't think first. And finally, when those lower systems are organized, when we are feeling safe and when we are feeling felt, then we learn. And it comes in that order. So in this new lens for discipline, we're looking at co-regulation. We are looking at how, as a school system, as a community, we can use school as the de facto. We can turn that systemic and community adversity and trauma into resiliency, because the greatest gift that we have is this gift of resiliency, which is neuroplasticity. And that's what gets me up every morning. I think to myself, with every experience a child or adolescent encounters, an adult encounters, that brain changes structurally and functionally. That's the growth mindset that Carol Dweck talks about, and it's the resiliency research that gives us hope as we meet our students in brain development. And I want to end with this diagram today because this is being hardwired for humanity. Dr. Tom Garfat shared this beautiful diagram, and this is the sacred interpersonal in-between space. And I want to ask you today, when you think about connection, when you think about being hardwired for humanity, how do you use this space with your own children? How do you use this space with your students, with your partner, with your community, with your neighbors? We know that in every moment, we have this incredible ability to reach out non-verbally and verbally. And we have an opportunity to co-regulate a child or an adolescent, to listen and validate, not to respond, but to learn, or we can unintentionally escalate them. And because emotions are so contagious, we sometimes unintentionally escalate and jump into a power struggle and a conflict unknowingly. So when we think about being hardwired for humanity, I want to end with a story because I just found this fascinating. On a recent Friday evening, there was a young unemployed 20-year-old who reached out on this Friday evening on YouTube. And he said, "I will be there for anyone who needs me. I know you don't know me, but I am there for you if you need me." Over the next 64 hours, he received 5,000 text messages and emails. And I want to end with that because I think through writing in a journal, through looking at discipline in a way that we're not doing something to children, but we're creating something within them. And I think when we look at the power of technology to connect us emotionally and to connect us in a way where we are feeling safe and felt, that's a big, big shift. So we have this amazing miracle in our brains that want to connect with people, that need to connect with others, but that also never stay stagnant. We have this neuroplasticity our entire lifetime. And so as we begin to move into this next era, we've got to look at how we're disciplining children and adolescents and coming on that in the front, preventative, brain aligned, and looking to meet them with connection and regulation. Thank you.